Welcome to Try Babies, the podcast where we're not afraid to be seen trying and crying.
You're joined by Sunroom co-founders Michelle Battersby,
That's me,
and Lucy Mort, that's me. We helped build the world's largest dating apps, Bumble and Hinge, and now we're in the thick of building our own tech company, and we're bringing you along for the ride.
Each week you'll hear from us as we fill you in on the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to business, career, relationships, and everything in between.
We'll tackle your try or cry questions and share workplace tips that we've learnt along the way, as well as interviewing inspiring business leaders.
So get ready to go after what you want, be courageous, back yourself, and build your dream career. This is Try Babies.
Today's episode is our last episode of the year. A quick thank you so much for coming along on this Try Babies journey. We have so many exciting guests in the works for 2024.
Today we unpack the dirty little word known as influencer. There are over 65 million influencers on Instagram as of 2023, and up to 60% of millennials and Gen Zers are stating they'd like to become an influencer for their career. So if this is such an aspirational job title, where is all the shame and judgment coming from? Let's get into the chat. Welcome back to Try Babies. It's a frantic start over here for our last episode of the year. That actually rhymes. Yeah, wow. I'm sitting here with my pants undone because I've got to the stage where my jeans no longer fit me. So this is nice for people watching at home.
Oh, man. What's your, I mean, this is a little bit of a tangent, but are you going to buy new clothes or are you just going to try and make do?
I don't really know. I feel like on our salaries, Lucy, buying new clothes isn't really an easy decision.
Look, I'm okay if you want to just wear sweatpants to the office.
Yeah. Buying new clothes is a luxury that we can't really afford. I will buy new clothes. I just feel a bit weird about it at the moment. Like I don't really know what to do because I'm basically just at a size where all my clothes fit. I just can't do them up. I just can't do pants up. So I can like semi get away with it. And the thought of investing in clothes that I'll never wear again is not really for me. So I think I'm just going to have to find stuff with like elastic waists.
Yeah.
Thank God we're going into winter because like I will probably just wear like leggings and trackies.
Yeah, just go to Arlo.
Yeah. So, okay, are we kicking off with a try or cry?
Oh, man, yeah, I always forget about this one.
Yeah, you can go. What would you like?
Oh, man, let's go try.
Okay, hit me.
Let's go try. I am sort of in the process of trying to detach from my identity as a designer at Sunroom and like moving more back to where I was at the start and like playing the role of the CEO and like stepping away from like really owning product and trying to just focus much more on my leadership of the company. And it's I don't know, you just have to like unlearn some things, or like your day to day you have to like reprioritize what you're thinking about, what you're working on.
Well, you will have to keep everyone informed on the strategies you implement.
Yeah, I don't know if there's necessarily strategies per se, just more like a constant reminder of like, you don't need to do that, you need to do that.
Yeah. I do know that would be hard. I feel like your identity is very much design as your value add, I suppose. But it also is leading the company. So it's, I guess, just learning how to be a hat switcher, a context switcher.
All right. What about you? Try or cry?
Mine's not really a personal one, actually. It's more of a follow-up from our last episode that we did on The Girl Boss. I actually read, so I guess it's kind of a cry for women in the world. I read an interesting article this morning that was actually comparing the treatment of Emily Weiss, the CEO and founder of Glossier, to the CEO and founder of Bird Scooters. So I guess for people in Australia, you probably wouldn't be aware of Bird, I don't think, but it actually was the fastest growing startup in America at one point, and I think it reached like unicorn valuation in record time. And they're basically these electric scooters that everyone really gets around on Venice. They can be fun but deadly as well. Anyway, their valuation, I think they IPO'd and their valuation has just absolutely fucking plummeted to the point where the CEO and founder's house is now worth more than the
That's
company.
right. Oh my God.
Yes, in Miami. And there was this article just talking about the teardown stories around Emily Weiss and how her company is a massive failure. Yet I think it's on track to do 100 million this year and his company's on track to do like 30 or something, and yet there are no real scathing headlines. There's none of this failure story. Everything is quite reasonable, which I just don't think is how that girl boss generation were treated in terms of their shortcomings or perceived failures. So I just thought it was an interesting circle back.
Just, held to a higher standard. And we might be for a while.
Yeah. Okay, so today's episode, Lucy, what's it about? Tell me.
So we are digging into this perception that influencer or being an influencer is this dirty thing, or it's a dirty word. It's a concept, or it's like this perception that we think about a lot as we're building Sunroom. A lot of our users, a lot of our creators face this as they try to monetize and they try to like generate an income as creators and as influencers. You recently have even faced it yourself and done some thinking about it. So we kind of want to get into it. Like, I think maybe by like starting off like how we even define an influencer, because it is like a relatively new term.
Yeah.
Right? Last like 15 years,
Yeah.
10 years even.
I think this is so interesting. It is a good point, start on the definition. And I think it's interesting to think about the definition because I feel when influencer is used in this derogatory way that it is often used as a way to silence someone, dismiss someone, remove any credibility a person may have, I think it's looking at influencer in a different way than maybe people would define influencer. Like, I mean, I think I define influencer as someone who influences people to purchase products, and the way they tend to do that is through sponsored posts that they are paid for. That is what I think is probably the more traditional definition of influencer. I think it's evolved, but I do feel like the influencing around buying products is a pretty critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Can you influence people on ideas, or does that make you a politician?
I think
like Clem Ford.
I think you can, but I think that's when it starts to get into this territory where those influencers, it's not used as a dirty word. And this is what I think like the interesting thing is. I think it is used as a dirty word to target a certain type of influencer, because you could argue like Barack Obama's an influencer, Michelle Obama, Beyonce, you know, they're all doing like similar things at times across their socials, but influencer is never going to be thrown out at them as a way to tear them down. It tends to be thrown out to tear women down who promote products online.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes dirty, and that's when it is used in its most dirtiest form, I think.
I feel like society has always had this disdain for a salesperson, right? We sort of like screw our noses up at someone who like puts on the
real estate.
Yeah, exactly. And this is like sort of another iteration. Like it has it's a different variety. It has a different flair to it. But it is, it's like selling at the core.
It has way more snark in it than how those other types of sales people are treated, I think. It really has nastiness embedded in it, and sexism massively. And I think we have discussed this so many times, you know, how influencer is used as a dirty word, and you see it happen online. You see it in people's comments. You see people say, oh, influenza. And I don't think people realize how much like misogyny is under all of that. Like underneath all of that are quite systemic, bigger cultural problems that I think people are very happy to overlook and not want to unpack and just do the whole like, yeah, they're just an influencer. But I don't think you realize how much that is saying to actually have that perception of a whole category of person.
Right.
Yeah.
So like last night at dinner, I mentioned to my partner Jerome that we were talking about this topic, and I was like, and it seems to be like it is a female, women-dominated industry, and then like why is it that they're like these women are torn down, are degraded, are like made to feel like their job or what they're doing is less than. And he, as a man, had an interesting perspective. He's like, I think because in advertising, women's beauty for a really long time has been used to sell products. Like even before TikTok and Instagram existed, we've used women's beautiful faces to push product. And he was like, my experience opening Instagram is it's very obvious. Like I'm shown beautiful women everywhere who are selling
Well,
products.
that's his algorithm. Those are his taste. Sorry, Jerome. I think you've really exposed yourself. No, keep going.
But I have heard other men say this, and I wonder if some of, and I'm not going to say it's only men who have this disdain towards influencers because it's also women, but I wonder if it's this feeling that like, men are definitely being sold to, and like women's beauty is like used to seduce them into buying products, and it works. And so like they end up feeling like just bad about that, or they like dislike that. It's almost like with sex workers, right? Who like will seduce men for something that, you know, men who want to be seduced. And then afterwards there's this like regret or disdain or like, oh, I can't believe, you know, I let her do that. Or
I also wonder if it just shows that women have this power. If you're looking at men and women as kind of, you know, cis, heterosexual, that kind of is all I'm really talking about here. Women have this power that men aren't really able to access. And I think that is where this patriarchal society and these, sexist views all stem from, because women really do have the upper hand. And we've been made to feel bad for leveraging our bodies, beauty, femininity, because it does get us ahead. And I think that is why it's just so ingrained in society to tear that down. And like this is something that we've spoken about at length, and it's really ingrained in Sunroom, is about allowing women to utilize those things if they want to. You don't have to, but if you want to, you should be able to use those things, because everyone's got a subset of like qualities, skills. Everyone's got their toolkit, you know. Some are more physical, some are maybe more, I don't know, internal, your brain, whatever it may be. Humor even, you know. And people are allowed to pull on those. It feels like men have always been able to pull on anything from their toolkit and not be judged for it. Yet when a woman does, she's teared down. And I think because the influencer space, it is a lot about the physicality and how you appear online. You know, it's been very aesthetic. It's been very curated for a long time. It's very, very visual. And so I think that is also where a lot of this negativity and this dirtiness comes from. Like it's really... It is really a result of the patriarchy, to be honest.
yeah. And I think thinking about it like that really helps you, because I will admit I was guilty of having these thoughts about the term influencer, you know, long before I started Sunroom.
So was I.
Because I think we're just like, I don't know, pawns in this, you know, world where we just accept whatever the status quo is.
Exactly. And it is internalized misogyny, really. Like when you have those thoughts, those judgy thoughts, I think it's really important to try and stop yourself in that moment and think, where is this thought actually coming from? Is this an original thought? Do I truly care that much about this thing I'm viewing? Do I truly feel this judgment that's coming up? Or is it because society's told me I should judge this and that that's bad and that that's desperate or that's less than or that's easy? And so, I think we probably all have a bit of work to do in that department. Like I still sometimes can catch myself judging things online, and I do really try to stop myself and assess where the judgment is coming from. I also think there are a lot of people that if they could live their lives like many influencers do, they would. Like, I think there is a lot of jealousy there as well because it is so visual, it is so pretty a lot of the time. So I think it can also look easy maybe to people who aren't educated in the space or haven't had exposure to it. By no means am I suggesting being an influencer is the world's hardest job, but I think people also tend to overlook the skill. Like, it takes it's marketing, it's branding. It takes skill to be able to appeal to a large demographic of people. It takes confidence and guts and courage to show up every day in the face of all of this judgment as yourself and share opinions. It's hard to retain an audience, especially in today's world, especially on Instagram. You've got to adapt to the different platforms that are evolving. You have to try and find a way to monetize yourself. You have to try to find a way to stand out in an overly saturated market. You have to be good at generating content, absorbing what a brand is wanting from you, and then like spinning it back out. It is a craft.
Yeah.
It also is important, before I forget, to say, like, I'm definitely not saying all influencers are incredible at their job. You know, just like in any industry, there are people who may not behave in the best way, who may not behave ethically, who may be performing to generate a certain outcome. You know, maybe a persona has been invented to show up in this way. Maybe they're that clued in. They're like, I know if I can show up in this way, that's what's appealing to the market right now. So I'm going to show up like X, Y, and Z, you know? So I definitely think there's been problematic things done by influencers, but there have been problematic things done by people in every single industry. But the people in other industries aren't publicly shamed and torn down. And there's like a hate campaign on the streets for their name.
Yeah. I mean, it's just you're operating in such a public forum as an influencer. Do you think it's possible to influence too much? Like I've seen this thing recently where a lot of influencers are coming out and they're saying, I'm only going to promote products that are authentic to me, that I actually feel like I could use, which surely has to limit the amount of money they can make and the amount of clients they can work with. But is there, I wonder if that's maybe where some of the disdain comes from, when you can sense as a viewer, this person is just like pushed it too far and more of their content is about selling random shit that doesn't seem authentic to them. I don't know. Even in that sentence, sorry, that sounded really mean, random shit, because it's like that's legitimately like their way of making money. So like,
for sure. And I think people would feel what you just described. I also think it's a privilege for an influencer to be able to get to a position where they can come out and say, I'm only going to promote things that are authentically me, because it's also probably indicative of the fact that they've made it to a certain point where now they can pick and choose the brand deals that they do. But there are so many creators who wouldn't have that choice. And so they would be taking any deal they can to make $1. Who is that on? Is that on the influencer, or is that like the industry? You know, like, is that brands? Should they be hitting people up that don't align with their brand? You know, like, should the marketers and social managers at a company be able to identify people that would be the right fit, not just go out to maybe anyone, or perhaps creators that they might think are cheaper than others? Like, I wonder what side of the market is responsible for that, or if it's both parties.
Yeah. Or if it's just the viewer and it's like up to the viewer's discretion whether or not they're down to tolerate the sales content for the sake of supporting that person that they've followed for a while.
We're taking a quick break from the episode and we'll be right back, but we love hearing from our listeners. So if you have any burning questions for us, please hit us up on Instagram at our Try Babies, the podcast Instagram page. You can also join us in our Facebook group. Let's get back to the app. What do you define as an influencer?
Somebody who uses their audience or platform or unique distribution that they have built to Yeah, I guess it's like push a certain agenda, but more often that agenda is around consumerism,
Consumption.
consumption.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think when the word influencer is used in this way we're diving into, it is used to encompass all the different branches of the influencer tree, or do you feel like it's a little bit more highly targeted?
I think it's highly targeted, and it's really interesting to see the emergence of the term creator
Yes.
come about, because like creator is a much more like socially acceptable label for people, and you can see a lot of people adopting it now because they want to rid themselves of this like influencer label. They want to be seen as someone who is generating, who is creative, who is productive, who is like offering something valuable to the world.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But and so I feel like we have transitioned a little bit now, and in part of embedded into the term creator is just a greater sense of respect. Like, hey, we know that you're creating media for us for our entertainment, and so we are going to give you that title that you deserve.
I totally agree. I think creator is helping us move away from that snarkiness and judgment. It's interesting because when I wrote my big post on influencers, I feel like 99% of people who consumed that understood it. It wasn't a post about if I personally am an influencer or not. Like, you could probably make a case for me being an influencer, and you could probably make a case against me being an influencer. But what it is about, or was about, is that because I'm rarely referred to as an influencer, when it happens, I have this really unique perspective because I can see how people respond to me when I'm introduced as the tech founder versus how people respond to me when I'm introduced as the influencer. And it is, chalk and cheese. It is complete opposite ends of the spectrum. And the comments prove that. And so it just... it's something that's been on my mind for a really long time because of these, handful of experiences that I had, and then I felt like I just had to put a pen to paper and actually put this down, because it's just wild how as soon as you're introduced, for me as an influencer, I'm no longer treated as a credible source. People speak about my appearance. I'm treated like I don't have a job, which is just wild.
Yeah.
And I can totally detach myself from that because I know who I am and what I'm about. But imagine if you don't have that other title that you are introduced as most of the time, and you are constantly out there trying to do good work, and you are constantly not taken seriously because there is a section of society that fucking hate influencers.
Right.
Like, that's literally it. And it's not as simple as hating influencers. It's all of this stuff underneath. It is misogyny. It is sexism. It is a disdain for women that show up on the internet in a certain way. And I just think that's really disappointing to still see happening. And I honestly just felt a need to defend those people, or be like, I see you. This would be so hard to get through all the time.
The term influencer, it just brings so much focus onto this one sort of small element of their role where they're selling.
Yes.
And it totally disregards the topics people are talking about, the ideas people are sharing. Like, I wish we could just look at somebody individually and be like, oh, this person has built an audience because they've shared really candid behind the scenes of what it is like to be a model, or like whatever else it is. And like, or share certain perspectives on what it's like to build a company. Like, just say what the thing that they're the thing of value that they're delivering,
like
that
they're
people
an
follow them
opinion
for.
leader in X space, doing really advocating for this, podcast up. But then I'm like, do we have to hide so hard from that label? Because as I was writing my thing, I was like, when I first saw all these comments like, oh, is her job one of the useless ones? You're just going to leverage your child for content to make money anyway. Yeah. The ones about my forehead not moving, I'm like, did you miss the part where I'm nearly 5 months pregnant, which means I can't get Botox and I haven't had Botox in like a year.
Yeah.
It was just good light. Anyway, I was like, I felt the need to reply, to say all these things, to say that. Like I felt the need to reply being like, what's useless about, I almost felt like I had to vomit my achievements up. And then I was like, no, that's the whole problem here. Like I shouldn't have to prove I'm something other than an influencer to be taken seriously.
Right.
Like that is the whole problem.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to dig into why are we like this as a society? Because it's just, I think, yet another way to hate on women's work and to use labels to just completely disregard what often feels like women. You know, it's models, it's influencers, it's teachers, it's nurses, it's mothers.
Well, I think you nailed it before when you talked about the toolbox. It's like certain skills or attributes that we have that men will never have because they're just not naturally wired that way, or like physically they're not made up that way. And it's like out of reach, and it's probably frustrating because it is like a very freeing and like powerful way of making money for yourself and like creating a career for yourself. And it's inaccessible to half of the population. And they're mad about it.
That's exactly it. I know. That's why we did a TikTok as a team the other day actually about like, you're going to get judged for it anyway, so just do it.
Yeah.
It just often feels like we just can't win.
Yeah.
I do like it when these things happen though, because it just reminds me how much progress we still have to make as a society. And I think when you work at a company that's progressive, or if you work with a lot of women, or you work with a lot of like-minded people, you can end up in a bit of a bubble where you actually aren't exposed to how much discrimination, sexism, misogyny, how women are still disadvantaged, demoralized, dismissed in many situations.
Yeah.
And that's why like we have to keep speaking about the things that matter. And I also think it's good if people react in an angry way sometimes, because it just means that you're actually making a bit of a difference. Like if you're pissing people off, I think you're onto something.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sort of related to this, one of my favorite tennis players, Nick Kyrgios,
Yes.
he launched an OnlyFans last week. And I just found it so interesting. Like OnlyFans has come a long way. Definitely the perception around OnlyFans and the stigma has changed slightly, or so I thought. Opened up the comments of that announcement post, and he's just being torn to shreds for doing this. And then a couple of days later, he posted something about his tennis, and I opened the comment drawer on that one, and everyone's like, stick to OnlyFans, mate. Like, just go back to Only. And like, that is all it's taken for him. And he's a dude. He's like who has decided to go on OnlyFans. But I think particularly when it comes to creating or setting up on a monetization platform, this sort of like derogatory, like looking down upon someone is even like amplified beyond what it is if you're an influencer. It's because you're selling, except this time you are selling access to yourself. You're selling your personality. You're selling your body in a way, or packaging it up. And I just like, yeah, I was really like shocked. And
yeah, do you know what? As you were speaking about that, it made me think something, and I don't know if I felt like I'm onto something with this thought or not, but he's Australian, and I'm assuming a lot of his followers would be Australian, and Australians fucking love to rip someone apart.
Yeah.
You know, like I just think even the comments you were saying, like this sounds very Australian, to just shit on someone for doing something like this, for being the first. I don't know how many other elite athletes in Australia have launched OnlyFans. I also think in America, OnlyFans has become very accepted. I think Australia is still somewhat catching up to that. But I do wonder if there's just tall poppy syndrome in there as well. Like on one post, you've got people shitting on him for posting about OnlyFans, and he tries to speak about tennis and he's still going to get shat on. He's probably experienced this so frequently. He's like, they're all going to hate me regardless. You know, I may as well make $1.
Yeah.
But think about Olivia Mathers as well, another Australian who launched her Instagram subscription, ripped apart in the comments. You don't tend to see that when the American I've never really seen creators on our radar launch any form of subscription and get torn apart like I had noticed with Olivia Mathers and Nick Kyrgios.
So it's Australians, and there's like I mean, the tall poppy syndrome is really real. Like this sort of, you're going to be an entrepreneur and going, because it is a form of entrepreneurship, like starting an OnlyFans and starting your business on an OnlyFans or a sunroom.
Yeah, it's like, no, you get back down here with the rest of us. I don't know. People ask me about tall poppy syndrome all the time, and I never feel like, honestly, every time I do a Q&A, there will be a handful of comments in there like, how do you feel tall poppy syndrome compares from the US to Australia? And I've never really felt personally, maybe I haven't thought about it hard enough, but I've never really felt like Australians have come at me or that the Australian culture has held me back. But I don't think I'm a big enough fish to have felt that. I think you have to like be at a certain level before you really feel something like that. And I wonder if Olivia Mathers and Nick Kyrgios are examples of when tall poppy syndrome comes into effect.
Yeah,
I also don't
possibly.
want to hate on, like, I fucking love Australia. I think Australia is the best. So maybe I'm also somewhat want to defend that Australia is like that. But I think just as you've brought this up, I do think it's interesting that the comments sound really Australian. I wonder if they were made by Australians. Wonder what his audience is like.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because thinking about my own experiences with tall puppy syndrome, I don't think I've had people like my Australian friends or my Australian community criticize me or try to tear me down at all. Like quite the opposite. I think people are like, whoa, she's doing that. That's cool. But I think where it comes out is like, I have found living here to be a much safer environment to take risks and to be like, yo, I'm going to go do this like crazy thing. And I'm going to put myself out on a limb. Whereas like, I don't know, it'd be interesting if I moved back to Australia one day. Like, would I feel like there was enough like inertia and momentum around me from my community to be like, yo, I'm going to go and do this thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I've only ever felt supported by Aussies, even on social media, even with the few things that I've just experienced in the last couple of weeks. I've not looked at those incidents as this is an Australian thing. I've looked at it more as like, well, maybe it is Australian, but it's deeper. It's like a societal issue. It's not tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah.
Or maybe it is.
Yeah. Another fascinating piece of content that I saw leading up to this podcast is this Chinese influencer who made $13 million, I think last week or recently, doing like a marathon influencing session where she literally has a conveyor belt in front of her. And it must have been, I think it's like, I want to think it's some sort of commentary on like influencing pushed to its extreme, maybe, or maybe it was a stunt and she just wanted to make as much money as she could. And she's like, I'm going to do this crazy stunt. And she is just picking up one product after the next, being like, and she'll quickly describe it onto the next one, quickly describe it. And she's like, and it is the most wild thing. She does this for hours.
How did she make the money?
I think everybody who gave a product, and there was probably a lot of like PR around this particular stunt. I have to think it was like broadcast in some way.
I wonder, like, was it the volume of products? I'm just wondering what brand would pay for a second.
I don't know. I don't know. But like, I'm also wondering what viewer would actually sit there and watch it.
Yeah, like,
in a weird way, it was mesmerizing. It was some sort of like shopping ASMR. I was like, yep, and this thing and that thing. It happened so quickly.
Interesting. I do think the way products show up online is definitely changing. Like Kylie Jenner did a post the other day for one of those energy drinks, and it was just a super hot photo of her holding up a can, and it was jarring to me because I was like, wow, I have not seen an influencer creator show up online like this, simply holding a product in so long. Like this feels very 2018. What is going on here? Because I just feel like we all got so used to being pushed a product in that way. So people have had to innovate, you know. I think like the TikTok Get Ready With Me is such a great example of how it's become so much more interesting the way you get convinced to buy something. It's much more casual. It's much more integrated into your everyday life. So to then see someone just be like, you know, it wasn't like that. It was way hotter. But it was like a Kylie Jenner version of that.
But is that actually the most authentic way of selling a product? It's like, hey, I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to try and hide the fact this is an ad. This is an ad. It's an ad. But your mention of TikTok, like, so TikTok recently introduced TikTok Shop, where you have that little yellow label that appears whenever anyone is selling a product within that video. And I am going to be fascinated to see if they keep that feature, because transparently, I see that yellow label and I skip.
You just disregard it.
I just disregard it because I know I'm going to be sold to in a sort of subtle, integrated into this story or this Get Ready With Me, and I just don't want to be. And so I have to think the engagement on those posts is like rubbish, but we'll see.
It's so interesting as well because I also, you know, that niche corner of TikTok where it's all social media and marketing managers talking about the rates of influencers and what the amount of followers someone has and how much they charge and what their engagement is. I also find it interesting that we haven't really evolved from that follower engagement audience, those stats. Like, why are there not conversion metrics?
Like sales conversions.
Yeah. Like that's the number one thing you want to be interested in. Like it doesn't really matter how many followers you have or what your engagement is. Do you have the kind of audience that actually buy what you're telling them to buy?
That's so true.
Like why aren't there?
But I guess TikTok Shop would provide those sort of metrics.
Yeah. So maybe that's where that is going. But I also have found it interesting in my time. Like we used to do a lot of this at Bumble where you'd give someone a specific link, you'd be tracking exactly how many registrations they got. And I would never have influencers reach out to know the number. Like how many downloads did I get? How many registrations did I get? I would really want to know that, I think. But maybe because it is such a smaller percentage than everything else, it just doesn't, it's probably never going to look as impressive. I don't know. I wonder why there isn't that desire there.
Yeah. I mean, you only manage what is measured. And to your point, it's not like really strictly measured all the time. It's like sometimes a little ambiguous.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to downloading an app. Like, yeah, you can have a download link, but like not everyone uses the download link.
Also, it's like, sure, you could be promoting a product, they can buy it online, which would be really easily tracked, but it's not tracked if the person goes into store and buys it.
That's an interesting area for innovation. If anyone out there is looking for an idea to build in this space, I don't know how to do it, but some sort of like true attribution of conversion and like then trying to orient creators and influencers around like the actual selling moment.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a difference between the platforms with this perception of influencers? Because like if you think about TikTok creators, do they face the same sort of judgment that like the traditional Instagram influencers do?
Such an interesting point. I think the original TikTok influencers do, like the Charli D'Amelio's, Addison Rae's. And you know why? This is also just so bad that I've connected the dots in my mind. They were showing up ultra feminine. They were doing dances. You know, it was these like quite girly, cheery dances. That was like the first generation of TikTok as we know it, not when it was, what was it before? Was it Musically?
Yeah.
Which was more about like lip singing, wasn't it? Yeah. But I think that's not the TikTok we all kind of know. I think it is these dance trends that like blew it up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think they, but then I'm thinking about now Alex Earle. I do think people would view her, I think people would use influencer in that. I still think the people that hate influencers would look at her as an influencer.
Right. But people that are okay with it, she's like the darling of the internet. Like everyone adores her.
I'm fucking obsessed with her.
But I also wonder, like the really like OG influencers, a lot of their content was static photos. And with TikTok, you obviously can't do photos. So you show up, you're animated, you're showing up with your personality. You literally have to talk to get views and to get somewhere. And so maybe it's you're ascribed a little more value, your content is.
But how fucked is that?
Yeah.
Because I do think that's probably it. You know, people view showing up as TikTok as you needing more skill because you can't just depend on your looks. But that just depending on your looks, like that's what is looked down upon. And that's always aimed at women.
Yeah.